Welcome to Expert Connections. I'm Julie Holton. Even if you wear comfy PJs all day, the trade-off for working from home, long hours, more virtual meetings, and blurred lines between work and personal time. Job search site monster.com finds 69% of people are burnt out working from home. Not surprisingly, 73% say they miss in-person social interactions at work. And 64% say there are, of course, fewer distractions in the office compared to home. But even more critical, the CDC now says that 41% of adults are struggling with mental health or substance abuse. That's nearly double what had been reported before the pandemic. The question now becomes, what does this mean for business leaders and their teams? It's the topic of today's Heart and Soul Connections. Michelle Hutchison joins me. She's with She Leads Michigan and is a master's clinical social worker in the field of education with an emphasis on building resilience, neuropsychological resilience in the brain. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Julie. Thanks for having me today.
Michelle, such an important topic because Zoom fatigue is not just a buzzword. We know the burnout is real. So tell us, how is the pandemic impacting our brains?
Yes, that's such a great question. It's really, stress, the increase in cortisol in our brains that has come from this pandemic. And that increase in cortisol can cause depression and anxiety. And then we take the social isolation into account. And we understand that our brains are really needing some additional support to build resilience and to grow healthy mental wellness.
Okay, so what do business leaders need to do about this, to build that resilience, to help their employees? And I also want to ask with parents, a lot of them, pulling double duty right now, working from home, and their kids are in virtual school at home. How can parents help their child's development?
Such great questions. It really all comes down to the human advantage, making sure that we're building relational connection with one another, because that's what replaces all of those feel-good chemicals and hormones in our brain and what helps us to remain grounded. We need one another. The science tells us that. And so you can do simple things with your children, such as play with them, hug them, make sure that you're taking those masks off and giving big smiles and using really big facial expressions, even as teachers, to make sure that the brain is feeling some excitement. And for business leaders, it looks the same. How do we make sure that in a world of Zoom and using technology to connect, that we're also connecting face to face? Or if we can't connect face to face, that we're really making sure that we're talking on the phone versus just texting or emailing. All of that makes a difference to our neural makeup.
And certainly providing those resources to employees is important. Michelle, one member of She Leads Michigan has found a really unique way to guide her daughter's development during this pandemic, while also creating a really unique bonding experience for them. Take a listen to a clip from their new podcast.
You found us! Welcome to Going Against the Flow podcast, where you and your middle schooler can dive into discussing relevant topics together with us crazies.
Woo! Yeah, we are in this world, but not of it.
You'll be able to tell.
Bringing a bit of clarity to situations we face today by turning to what the Bible teaches. Here we go!
Joining us now is Rachel Doring. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Okay, Rachel, we just heard a clip of your podcast. How fun is this? Tell us what led you to develop this podcast with your daughter?
Yeah, long story short, there was a huge vacancy for podcasts for that specific generation of 10 to 14-year-olds. During quarantine, I had a huge concern for the lack of socialization for my girls, especially my eldest, who's 12. And really the spiritual development of her is crucial because she's entering into adolescence. She needs to have support, guidance, and healthy, godly relationships. So the church was trying to be creative with ideas. As much as I appreciate their efforts of reaching out on social media, trying to be innovative with games and competitions on different social media platforms, my husband and I were really opposed to having our daughter enter into that world at such a vulnerable, impressionable age. So I had to get creative and take matters into my own hands. I explored podcasts. I wanted to find something that had biblical depth and devotions where we could connect. And it was so disappointing because I came up with absolutely nothing. There were tons of parenting podcasts and there were tons of high school podcasts, but that topic was just too heavy for Kyla. It went over her head, and just the way it's really tricky because at that age they can go deeper spiritually than an elementary level, but they still get distracted really easily. So I looked at her and I thought, there's nothing. We've got to do our own podcast. Let's do it.
Yes. And Rachel, can you tell me a little bit, once you developed this podcast with her, how did that change or impact your relationship?
Yeah, I mean, we were able to spend more time together developing content. Her and I co-host it together, which is really unique too, because I'm able to get her perspective. I'm able to hear about topics that she's passionate about dealing with in school. She's really grown spiritually because we're tackling these topics that she doesn't talk about at school or with her friends, but the things she is talking about at school really do pertain to what we're doing on our podcast. So I can apply biblical principles to it and at her level where she can understand and grapple with things, so that in the long run, she's learning to use her faith and biblical principles to address things she's facing at school, which is going to set her up for long time success. And I mean, so growth spiritually and really time together has been amazing doing this together.
What an incredible way. I love hearing stories about this, Rachel, of really taking this challenge. You couldn't find something out there that you really wanted to help your daughter and to help her through this pandemic time. And so you just created it yourself. And we just love hearing stories like this. We wish you much success. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
All right, my pleasure.
For the link to Rachel's podcast and to hear more tips from Michelle on building resilience, head to our website, WLAJ.com, and click Heart and Soul Connections.